Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and around the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 till 8 p.m. broadcasting on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter and on TikTok. Welcome to everybody. Please do send in your comments. We've got a packed show tonight and we're going to give everybody a shout out who says hello. So please do tell us where you're viewing from and tell us what's on your mind. What's on your mind this evening in our great British land and indeed throughout the world, because I know many of you are watching from around the world. Isn't that wonderful? The wonders of modern technology. We have got a packed programme. We're going to be talking about Sturgeon's Masque performance. More about that in a moment. We're going to be talking about the surprising and the interesting UK-Rwandan axis. And we're also going to, of course, at the bottom of the hour, have our On This Day in British History, followed by our competition. And our competition tonight is to win this gorgeous little badge commemorating the Queen's 70th Platinum Jubilee, and that will be going to the first person who answers the question this evening by sending in the correct answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and we'll be giving you the question at the bottom of the hour at 7:30 for this lovely little enamel pin badge. Good evening to everybody. To Debbie, who is second in this evening because TC was the first in, says good evening everybody. Good evening to Nelson, all fellow Unionists everywhere around the world, and to Tommy, good stuff, and to Kenny Calderwood. We'll be talking about East Kilbride in a few moments because Sturgeon had a hair appointment in East Kilbride, if you know what I'm talking about. Good evening to Richard and to Adam. Nice to see Adam in. United as one, divided by none is Adam's catchphrase. And he got notified on Facebook about this show. Well, that's good to hear. Good to hear. That's what we want. And hello to Margaret from Durham City and to Catherine. Good evening to you, Catherine. Catherine was out with us at our street stall. More about that in a moment. And to Harry Brown. Evening all Unionists. To Michael also, nice to see you. And to Jamie, evening all, says Jamie. And to Christopher, we've got a packed house tonight, says hello to all British patriots. And Raymond, good to see Raymond back in from the USA. Tell us what's happening over there in the USA, Raymond. And Adam says, Sturgeon went on Loose Women and said that she'd resign if she lost Indy Ref 2. Well, that would be the least we would expect her to do, certainly. And but she's not going to get Indy Ref 2 anyway, and she's going to end up resigning anyway. So we're going to have the best of both worlds there, eventually, in the fullness of time. Now, talking about time and how it passed, there's been 3-4 days since we had our street stall in the centre of the great British city of Glasgow, and this is the first in our programme of at least 10 street stalls which will be rolling out this summer. And it was on Saturday between 10 and 2 in Argyle Street. And I just want to say a big thank you to the dedicated table team, the three of us who were manning the table, and also an additional big thank you to the 9 specific supporters of AFFG who came along during the course of these hours to stand at the table and to show solidarity and to boost the morale of the table team. Every single one of you was very much appreciated. And together, the 12 of us said hello to scores of people passing by on Argyle Street, the overwhelming majority of which were, of course, sympathetic and favourable and very friendly to the stall. And we've got a picture of the stall there. There we go. That's about several of us there. Mostly just people passing by, signing our petition to ensure that there's not going to be a second referendum. And as you see, we've got two big flags there. Got a closer picture of the flag, which is a really nice one there. You see the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee flag. That was flying high, and that's going to be flying high from every single one of our street stalls this summer. And that's a good way to commemorate. And there's a picture of the table. Well, part of the table anyway, where we've got another Queen's Platinum Jubilee flag, and we were punting our magazines and wee books, which people were taking for a small donation, and that went very well, I have to say. Okay, now what we're going to be doing, as I mentioned, is in June of this summer, we're going to have a new Union Heart, which will be a 12-page celebration of the 70th Platinum Jubilee, and we'll produce it in sufficient quantity that we'll be able to give it out free to absolutely everybody who comes along to the street stall. And that is going to be addressing Scotland and the monarchy from our particular specific and concise and comprehensive perspective, addressing all the arguments for it, and of course nailing the arguments against it to the wall. So that will be a really good document, which will be really worthwhile, and looking forward to working on that actually in the month of May. Hi to Kayoshi, says evening all. Raymond says in America they're heading for a recession. That's what this seems to be the media opinion at the moment. Well, Adam says, Raymond also says our president is a word beginning with M. Adam says, what's your opinion on Boris getting a fine but Sturgeon getting a wee talk by the police over breaching her own mandatory Masque rule? That's a good point. Let's talk about that. Because, as some of you may know, last week, Madam Sturgeon was apparently just in a random street in East Kilbride, campaigning allegedly, and decided to walk into a barber shop for a photo op, which is a kind of unusual thing to do, really, at the best of times. How do you end up in a barber shop? Really, I mean, maybe you do, but it seems odd. That was the first thing I thought, was that's odd. What's she doing in a barber shop? And why is everybody happy? You know, if Sturgeon walked into most barber shops, you'd find probably a lot of the punters in the barber shop would not be entirely like fans necessarily, would it? But it was like 100% of the people in this barber shop were like pro Sturgeon, to a point where, please could you cut my beard, Mrs. Sturgeon? I mean, that's just taking it too far. So I always thought that was really weird. And do you know what? A picture emerged of this particular barbershop in East Kilbride a couple of years ago, and we'll put the picture up just in a minute or so. But when you look at the picture, I want you to see if there are any clues in that particular picture of this particular barbershop a few years ago that might lead you into understanding why Sturgeon went into this particular barbershop. Let's put the picture up. There you go. There's the barbershop, festooned with yes posters. Even the first floor window has got a yes poster on it, and there's this massive yes placard or creation leaning up against the window. Okay, so that gent's hairstylist was clearly well known as a Yes supporter. And so are we saying that that photo op was previously managed? Yes, we sort of are saying that, but we can't, of course, be certain because we don't have access to the workings of Sturgeon's massive PR team that we're paying for, by the way. We don't have access to what's going on in their heads, but it seems to look like that was arranged. But of course they made one little error. They forgot to tell Sturgeon to put her mask on. Masque, M-A-S-K, or perhaps Masque as in M-A-S-Q-U-E. So it ended up not so much as a mask as a mask performance. And what is a mask performance? A mask performance is a form of entertainment that includes performers wearing masks. Thus is the basic difference between mask, a face covering, and masque, M-A-S-Q-U-E, a performance. Okay, a mask performance. And so it turned into, the mask, M-A-S-K, turned into a masque, M-A-S-Q-U-E, performance, for the amusement, it must be said, of the entire world. And what should have happened? Well, if you're making the rules that says you have to wear a mask, then the least we can expect is that you follow them yourself. All right? And that's the least we should expect, but we couldn't even expect the least, unfortunately, from Madam Sturgeon. I wouldn't in a million years expect Police Scotland to do what the Metropolitan Police did, because it's a different command and control structure. Anyway, Sturgeon and the Scottish Executive are essentially the bosses of Police Scotland in a way that differs from the relationship between the Prime Minister and the police forces in England, which have a considerable degree of more independence than Police Scotland, which is essentially a state-controlled police force. And as we've said before, it was essentially made a state-controlled police force a few months before the 2014 referendum, because Alex Salmond wanted to ensure that if he won the referendum, he would be in charge of the police in case everything went to pot and everybody flipped out. So such is Police Scotland, so they're not going to do anything other than just give their boss, their ultimate boss, a very small and gentle talking to, probably by email. I can't even imagine it would be in person. I mean, can you? I really can't imagine that. Anyway. So, Kenny says he's heard a rumour that the police delivered a report on the missing 600,000 that Nicola Sturgeon is going to publish after the May elections. I don't know. That could be true. If it's a damning report, then she certainly won't be publishing it prior to the council elections, which of course are in May, the council elections in May, and the date to register is past. So if you haven't registered to vote, I'm afraid you're just going to have to suffer. But I know all our viewers will have registered to vote in that. So that's of course on Thursday, the 5th of May. And I was reading actually in the National, which I read so that you don't have to. Somebody wrote in a letter there saying, can we get 32 councils on board to take part in Indy Ref 2? And this person was pointing out quite rightly that when Nicola Sturgeon, or when the SNP people suggest that they're going to have a referendum without the permission of the British government, they're going to have to get the 32 different councils in Scotland to agree to invigilate that referendum. And because hopefully after the 5th of May, many of these 32 councils will not be controlled by the SNP, then thankfully these councils will not take part in Sturgeon's illegal referendum if she was so stupid as to hold one. And so that's another reason why the Scottish nationalist people shouldn't try to imagine that they can have a referendum without Westminster's permission, because the 32 councils are not going to agree to it. The pro-UK councils will not agree to allow their election office to take part in such a thing. And so again, it's just a pipe dream. And we tell people like this, and we have to share this information even with the people who don't agree with us, because we don't want them wasting their lives away. We don't want them thinking we can just hold on for a referendum, and we can have a referendum even if Westminster doesn't agree. No, figure it out. Politically, you can't, because it's going to have to involve all the local councils to agree, and there's 32 of those in Scotland, and most of them, let's hope after the 5th of May, will not be SNP controlled, and so will not go along with such a dozy plan. So Michael Bridges says that Sturgeon has nowhere to hide. The majority of areas that need fixing are devolved, unfortunately, to the Scottish so-called government. There's no way that they can blame Westminster. Well, they shouldn't blame Westminster for the problems that happen in the areas that are devolved, but of course they will blame Westminster, and they can get away with that because most people don't know which areas are devolved and which are not. And most people in Scotland, naturally, whether they're Scottish nationalists or not, have much more of an engagement with things at a British level anyway. They tend to see the leadership of Britain and Scotland as being at that British level, even though they wouldn't admit that. And so if something goes wrong, they're going to naturally blame Westminster. They're not necessarily going to blame Sturgeon. They'll just imagine that it's not in her control. And of course, as Kenny says there, yes, she gets off with much more. She gets off with much more than Boris, because that's a lot to do as well with the media here being much smaller and being less financially independent and much closer, often through necessity, to the Scottish state. They're not so hands-off, they're not so arm's length as much of the rest of the UK media. The Scottish media is what I like to say very incestuous, very much connected with the Scottish political establishment. Some of them are married to each other, you know, journalists and so on. They're all intermeshed in this kind of mix, and they're much less likely to hold the Scottish state to account. Hello to Ernest from Argentina. Thank you, Ernest. Kenny, who's from East Kilbride, says, I know a few of the people photographed with her, and they are all SNP. Absolutely, that would make sense, wouldn't it? And let us hope that Scots will vote for someone else who'll fix the economy instead of focusing on an independence referendum, which they're not going to get. That's it, isn't it? Don't waste your time voting for a referendum that you're not going to get. What you need to be doing is looking at who best can keep the streets clean, who best can pick up the bins, who else can clean the gutters along the streets. Oh my goodness me. I mean, you get lots of flooding in Glasgow here, where we're based, And it's because the drains are clogged full of mud that's been building up for several years now, because they don't have somebody with a spade that can just go along and scoop tons of mud from the main roads and from every street. Tons of mud. And you know, they have these silly wee lorry vehicles that go around with the brushes, you know. Well, the level of mud is so impacted now that these wee silly wee vehicles make absolutely no difference to it, because the brushes can't budge the mud. So it just needs a whole army of people to just to sort all of that out, and stop obsessing with stupid things like statues or street names or anything like that. Well, not stupid things, but stop obsessing with these ideological things and make some differences as far as actual physical reality is concerned. And will that happen? Will people vote for local issues? Will people vote to keep the streets clean, to lift the litter, to keep the drains free? Or will they vote for some illusory concept of a referendum that they're never going to get, at least not for several years yet, and not until the political circumstances change very much in their favour? And at the moment, there's no sign that that's going to happen. It's certainly not going to happen in the next few months. It certainly won't happen this year, and it's not going to happen before the next British general election, and it's not going to happen before the next Scottish election either, and it probably won't even happen after that. But we've always got to prepare, and that's what we are about as an organisation. So I mentioned we've got a competition coming up for this little badge, which is celebrating 70 years of Her Majesty on the British throne. And we'll be talking about this day in British history, some interesting points today, and then we'll ask you a question on it. And we will send this to the winner of our competition. And if you're watching on TikTok, please send to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Hello, Alistair. Sorry you missed the prize last week. Maybe you'll be in with a chance this week. Who knows? Richard's letting something off his chest here. He says, I'm cheesed off with Boris. Does he know he has enemies? Does he know how to avoid trouble? He lacks political nuance and insight. Also, he seems intent on leaving Northern Ireland half in and half out of the United Kingdom, yet he calls himself Minister for the Union. That's so true, isn't it? The Northern Ireland thing is so sad. It's absolutely so sad what they're doing, and so wrong, utterly wrong what they're doing with Northern Ireland, and very, very worrisome actually. So today, on this day in British history, because British history matters. On this day in British history, a couple of things to talk about. One that many people will not actually know about, and I didn't know about this until it was my dad actually was talking about a film he had seen with Steve McQueen called The Sand Pebbles, and he said he thought, and he's right, that it would be based upon a British film a few years earlier called the Yangtze Incident, about HMS Amethyst. And that's what I'm going to talk about just now. This is when the Chinese communists basically had a battle with the Royal Navy, and this is several years after World War II. It's in this day, 20th of April in 1949, the beginning of what was called the Amethyst Incident, named after HMS Amethyst, who was involved in it. And what this involved was several Royal Navy ships on the Yangtze River, which is the main river in China, which cuts sideways through from the sea at Shanghai inland. And it was during the summer of 1949, at the time of the Chinese Civil War, between the nationalists, Kuomintang, who were the nationalists of the Republic, versus the Chinese Communist Party. And the Kuomintang were sort of our allies, in a way certainly that the Chinese Communists were not. And it was on this day that HMS Amethyst went up the Yangtze, heading to Nanking, because she was simply on a diplomatic mission to replace HMS Consort, which was in Nanking, providing diplomatic defence for the British Embassy in Nanking. And she had every right to be sailing up the Yangtze, but the Chinese Communists thought otherwise, and they started firing on the ship as it sailed up the river. And we've got a picture of HMS Amethyst there. And she was built and launched in Govan on the Clyde in Glasgow, just a few years earlier, actually, back in 1943 during World War II. So she was still in service and on diplomatic duties there. Okay, so she was sailing up the Clyde. It's not the Clyde, the Yangtze, and that's put that picture up there. That's a stylized painting of her coming under fire from the Chinese Communists. And it was serious fire. By the end of the day, 22 Royal Navy sailors had been killed. And the ship was grounded. And a lot of them, luckily, were able to evacuate. And they got over to the Kuomintang side of the river to safety. But those who were not wounded stayed on the ship. And basically, HMS Consort was ordered to come down the river from Nanking and try to rescue her. And the Consort got into a big firefight as well. And she had 10 men killed by the Chinese Communists. And remember, this is 1949. This is well after World War II. And basically, the Consort couldn't do anything, so she had to just continue sailing downriver. And what then happened was that the Communists basically kind of took the ship over and held it until the end of July. Okay, they held that ship until the end of July, where on one dark night, circumstances changed and the ship was able to actually make a dash for freedom, 104 miles down the Yangtze River back to Shanghai in the cover of darkness. And she managed to get away, but she was held there for several months, and it became known as either the Amethyst Incident or the Yangtze Incident. And there was a film made in 1957, got the poster there, which we'll just put up, starring Richard Todd in the Yangtze Incident, the story of HMS Amethyst. And that was also known as Battle Hell in America. We've got a poster for that as well. That was the American poster. They called it Battle Hell. I haven't seen the film. If any of you have seen the film, please tell me. And in Germany, it was known as Helden zur See, which means heroes at sea. Okay. And as I mentioned there at the start, there's also a 1966 American film called The Sand Pebbles, starring Steve McQueen, which is a fictional tale about a US battleship that gets stuck up the Yangtze in the 1920s, which, although they deny it, sounds very much based on the British incident, I have no doubt. So as I say, that was that was the Amethyst Incident. Interesting battle in Royal Navy history that not many people know about it. Royal Navy versus the Chinese Communists. HMS Amethyst, as I say, launched in Govan on the Clyde back in 1943. And so that was on this day in British history, but on tomorrow in British history, of course, the 21st of April, back in 1926, a certain woman was born called Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor, who tomorrow will celebrate her 96th birthday in the 70th year of her being on the British throne. And she was born in 17 Bruton Street in London, which was the home of her maternal grandparents, the Earl and Countess of Strathmore. And so on behalf of the team and supporters at A Force for Good, we certainly would like to wish Her Majesty a very happy 96th birthday tomorrow, which is her it's not her official birthday, it's her natural birthday. Her official birthday falls in June, but her natural birthday falls tomorrow, 21st of April. And I was thinking 17 Bruton Street, I wonder what that looks like. Well, we've got a picture of it around the time of when she was born, which we'll just put up there. And that's 17 Bruton Street. And that's essentially where what we know as the Queen Mother lived and gave birth to the Princess Elizabeth. And there's a picture of the Queen Mother there. That's her leaving 17 Bruton Street to get married. It's a nice picture of her looking very pretty. And we've got a picture of her leaving Bruton Street when she had the baby. And there's Queen Elizabeth in the arms of the nanny, no doubt, with the Queen Mother looking very pleased with herself, as well she ought to. And I was wondering, what does Bruton Street look like today? Well, unfortunately, it looks like this. Okay, that whole block of buildings was demolished and that was put up in its place, which certainly doesn't compare. And I'm told that's a Chinese restaurant there down below it. Now see in the middle there, you'll see a couple of plaques on the wall. And I wondered, what do they say? And it says, this plaque was dedicated in the silver jubilee of her reign to Her Majesty the Queen, born here 21st of April 1926. And the other says, on this site at 17 Bruton Street stood the townhouse of the Earl of Strathmore and Kinghorn, where Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor, later to become Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, was born on the 21st of April 1926. Okay. So, long may she reign yet. Britain's longest reigning monarch and the fourth longest the world's ever known. Head of state of 15 Commonwealth realms and 14 British overseas territories. So that's tomorrow in British history. Now I've got a question for you, and suitably the winner will receive this wee badge. Now if you haven't done this before, simply just send the answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk. And there's a good chance that you'll win this, and we'll send it in the post to you tomorrow morning. So please do fire it in. The question, let me bring up the question here so I can get it right. The question is, on this day, 20th of April 1949, the beginning of the Amethyst Incident on the Yangtze River involving HMS Amethyst. The question is, where was HMS Amethyst built and launched? Send your answer, folks, to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and you might be in with a chance of winning. Good stuff. Good stuff. Somebody says, Adam says, to educate the Scottish nationalists, let's read a section of the Scotland Act 1998 and the St Andrews Agreement. Scotland Act says that unity of the kingdoms of England and Scotland are a reserved matter for Westminster, and the St Andrews Agreement says that the 2014 referendum is to be a once-in-a-generation event. That's interesting. That's interesting. Richard says, we hope the Scottish nationalists will have a bad time on May the 5th. It's true that Sturgeon and the Nats are utterly incompetent, but maybe 1/3 of all voters are still willing to vote SNP as a vehicle for secession. We'll see if some common sense will prevail. Well, all it takes is for all our supporters, all the people who want to vote to keep the United Kingdom, to turn up and to turn out to vote, because the turnout at Scottish Council elections are abysmal, utterly abysmal. They rarely get over 30 or 40% of turnout. So a lot of pro-UK people are staying at home. Now, people will say, well, I don't want to vote for any of the parties because I don't like any of the parties. And I totally understand what you mean. However, there is a split, obviously, between the parties who generally support the United Kingdom and those who don't. And those who don't support the United Kingdom are the SNP, the Greens and ALBA. And if they get into power, then they will do everything that they can to try to bring down the United Kingdom. Even in your local town or village, they will put the kibosh on things that they don't like. So sometimes you have to hold your nose, and you have to vote for the nominally pro-UK parties. And we would urge people to do so, because there's a lot of good people standing for these parties, and we need to get them into the halls of power. Now, on the 5th of May, you vote by number in order. Okay, so you can give your first choice number 1, your second choice number 2, your third choice number 3, your fourth choice number 4, and so on down the list. And all we suggest and all we strongly recommend is that you vote for as many as you want, but you do not have to vote for them all. And please do not vote for the SNP, the Greens or ALBA, or for any person standing as an independent that you don't know about, because that person might be, for all you know, anti-British. So only vote for an independent candidate if you know who that person is. By independent, I mean somebody standing on their personal own behalf. That's our recommendation. Just remember, you don't have to vote for everybody. Christopher says the drains are a metaphor for SNP run Scotland, and the mud too. Absolutely. It's like progress is blocked. Blocked. So McBartoy says Unionist 1, 2, 3. Yes, that's what you would do. The first 3 votes, 1, 2, 3, Unionist. I heard today as well there's a candidate standing for a party called British Unionists, which I thought was interesting. Just one candidate though in the whole of Scotland, but the party's actually called British Unionists. Fascinating. Must find out more about that. And Jamie says something that many people believe, of course, in the current state of affairs worldwide, pushing for independence makes no sense at all. Maggie there sends a few good British wishes. Yes, indeed, it is bonkers, isn't it? Voting for separation. Alistair says, can't believe the brass neck of the Scottish nationalists crying about the justified money that the UK government has spent keeping us all safe during COVID, but they're tight-lipped about the 660,000 their party has stolen from them. Indeed, indeed. Okay, Raymond says that he has to go to work. Well, thank you for checking in, and we'll have a great British night. Cheers, Raymond. So, what next? Yes, it's time for busting Indy Myths. We are busting Indy Myths on the daily, weekly, monthly and yearly until the Scot Nats see clearly. That's what we do here. That's what we do. We bust the Indy Myths. And in Busting Indy Myths Part 13, we're going to look at the oft-heard myth that Scotland has different values from England. So different that separation is the only way to protect those values. Sometimes it's framed as Scotland is more progressive than England. However, the fact is, Scotland and England have the same values. Now, why do the Scot Nats say this? Why do they say that Scotland and England have different values? Because culturally, the distinct elements of Scotland have always been protected. The cultural elements, they've always been protected within the United Kingdom. And as far as our identity goes, there's nobody stopping you being as Scottish as you want. So your Scottish identity is perfectly protected within the Union. So they can't claim that there's a cultural threat, and they can't claim that there's a threat to our identity. So what they have to do is they have to pretend that there's a threat somehow to a set of values that can only be protected with separation. However, this is a stretch and a half, it has to be said. Claiming that Scotland is more progressive than England simply cannot stand up to any reasonable analysis. For example, historically, you only have to look at England's long history of social reform movements to see that England has a huge history of such events, from the Magna Carta to the Lollards, to the Levellers, to the Diggers, to the Chartists, to the Tolpuddle Martyrs, to the Jarrow Marchers. The list is endless, and in fact it would make a very good article, which no doubt we'll get round to penning one of these days. And at the present time, studies suggest that there's very little social difference between the Scots and the English as far as their values on political matters are concerned. The future of the Union, of course, apart. In our wee book for the Union, we made this point, and we quoted here a December 2018 report by the National Centre for Social Research, which found that the percentage of people in Scotland or England who think immigration is good or bad is approximately the same. Okay, same number of people who support it, same number of people who are against it, proportionally speaking. It found that public opinion in Scotland is divided in similar ways to England, and that the evidence shows there's no appetite, as far as we're concerned, the evidence shows that there's no appetite for the SNP's plans for more immigration. And in fact, some people will vote for the SNP because they think wrongly that the SNP wants to control immigration. So, modern social research suggests that there's very little difference to our quote-unquote values. So, at the end of the day, the idea that Scotland has different values from England is really just a convenient political complaint to make about the current government in Westminster, imagining that it's got different values from the great mass of the Scottish people, which is a completely different argument, of course, from arguing that the Scots and the English themselves intrinsically have different values. Across the board, we've got the same sorts of values. And here's the thing as well, if these people got their way, then they would not be progressive, they would not be inclusive towards people like ourselves. Okay, they would not be progressive towards the British identity if they ever got their way. It's us Unionists who are open-minded on these sorts of social matters, especially matters related around identity. For example, we don't mind people saying that they're Scottish, not British. If that's their bag, that's their bag. But they really hate it when we say we're Scottish and British. So when it comes to these matters of identity, we are the ones who are much more inclusive. We are the ones who are much more progressive on those sorts of things. And if they ever got their way, they would not give us the time of day on those sorts of things. Indeed, they would continue to see our political identity as a threat that had to be silenced. If they got their way, they would not make any room for the British identity in Scotland. They would try to purge it. As we regularly point out, the SNP is trying to purge it right now, while we are still in the Union. They want to take down flags, and they've taken down the Union Jack from all their so-called government buildings. They want to revise Scottish history to get rid of all the pro-UK people from the age of achievement, which they don't like hearing about. And that's an ongoing matter, by the way, of course. So right now, it's us Unionists who are on the progressive side. We're the ones who are trying to keep it together. We're the ones who are trying to hold what we have. They are the ones who are trying to break up things. They are the ones who are trying to destroy the work of centuries for no gain, for no perceivable benefit. So, as we always say, it is the Union which is the true progressive alliance. Historically, we know that it's been coming together since the dawn of time, since Britain first arose from out the azure main, as the song by the Scotsman William Thomson called Rule Britannia states. And Scotland and England are no longer warring with each other as we did during the 12th and 13th and 14th centuries, because we've developed the political institutions of union. And politically today, it's progressive policies such as the NHS and the welfare state, which were created by the post-war British political consensus, which Scotland continues to benefit from today because of the Union. And as somebody mentioned in the comments, look at all the millions, indeed billions, that have come to Scotland in the last couple of years. And going forward, we know that the challenges which confront us must be resolved by working together. We know that a problem in Aberdeen concerns us if we live in Aberystwyth. A problem in Donegal concerns us if we live in Dundee. A problem in Glasgow concerns us if we live in Glastonbury. As British Unionists, we emphasise the values of solidarity, not separation. We emphasise the values of unity, not division. We emphasise the values of giving, not getting, the values of one for all and all for one. And as we always say, we know that Scotland is big enough and rich enough and clever enough to share its resources and to share its wealth with all its family throughout these islands. Attempting to destroy the United Kingdom is regressive. Keeping the United Kingdom together is progressive. The United Kingdom is the progressive alliance. And folks, we talk about this in our wee book for the Union, where we say the United Kingdom is the true progressive alliance. So please do consider buying that from our shop. Lovely. That so endeth Busting Indy Myths Part 13. We're putting a lot of good stuff together, which we'll be bringing together one of these days in a nice book. And this is what I was talking about earlier, is we're using this time in order to ensure that we can develop the tools which can be used to make the case if, God forbid, there were ever to be another referendum. We have to use this time right now, and we're dedicated to that, and the team at A Force for Good is dedicated to that. And goodness me, we have been producing some fantastic work. I just want to give a shout out to the team. I want to shout out to those who help us on Facebook, who help keep it running every day, who keep it such an edifying place to drop in on our Facebook page. I want to thank our political outreach officer, who's always sending our magazines such as Do More Together and our latest 10 Years Strong. We send these out to legislators, opinion formers, MPs, MSPs, anybody who ought to know about it. And you can get yours as well from our shop. We'll put the link up there. And I want to thank those who help on TikTok as well. And since we started this TikTok last summer, it's been going great guns. And we put a video up last week on TikTok that's got over 12,000 views on TikTok. And somebody shared it onto Facebook, and it's got 11,000 views on Facebook. So an excellent platform to reach lots of new people. So thanks to all the team members for everything that they do. Really good stuff. Please do follow us there, tiktok.com/@ UK A Force for Good. Talking about selling things, by the way, people have said, where'd you get that T-shirt? Which says A Force for Good. Well, you can get this T-shirt via our shop. We'll flash the shop link up there. And if you go to our shop, you'll see a link to our Teespring store. And you can get this, and you can also get ones that say Scottish and British, British Ulster, Welsh and British, English and British, British together. Several designs in T-shirts and in hoodies and in other apparel. Really good shop. And if you want to come out with us on our street stalls, then it's always good to be dressed appropriately if you want, so you can certainly get your T-shirts and hoodies at our shop. So we have a winner of our competition, which was to win this, and we asked, where was HMS Amethyst launched? And the answer was, of course, Govan on the Clyde in Glasgow. And so we'll keep you bated breath. Who is the winner? It's Chris Glenn. Fantastic, Chris. Well done. We will get this sent to you tomorrow. We've got some more of these, so they'll be over the course of the year. We'll be putting this out as a prize. Talking about ships being launched on the Clyde, there's one being built on the Clyde right now, which I'm pleased to say is called HMS Glasgow. And as Alan says, that's coming along nicely. I would like to think when it gets launched, we can all go to the launch party. But I don't know if they keep these things. I don't know how you get an invite to a launch party. If anybody knows, if we know anybody who's working on the Clyde and can get us invites to the launching of HMS Glasgow, whenever that may be, probably won't be for a year or so yet, please do tell us. Kayoshi liked the history of HMS Amethyst. It's amazing, isn't it? So yeah, we're going to be out again. We're going to be out again with our street stall. So if you want to join us, please simply send a message to contact@aforceforgood.uk and we'll tell you where and when. Khalifa Osman says, "A force for good, keep up the good work to move together." Well, thank you, Khalifa. We certainly will. Stephen says, education should be about imparting knowledge, not driving home a racist separatist agenda. Absolutely. Absolutely. So many comments tonight. I'm sorry I haven't been able to read them all out. Stephen says, well done, Chris, for winning. Alan says, well done. Alistair says, congrats, Chris. Catherine says, congrats. Debbie says, congrats, Christopher. Michael says, congrats. Christopher says, huge thanks. And thank you all. Absolutely. Thank you to everybody watching on TikTok as well. Folks, it's the top of the hour, so we'll be drawing this to a close. Just to say, we'll be back next week from 7 to 8 with our comment and analysis. If you know anybody who would like to be interviewed, please do tell us. If you're somebody who would like to be on the program to be interviewed, please do tell us, because we're always looking for guests, and sometimes we don't have the time to organise a guest because it can take a little bit of time. But if you know anybody, or if you are somebody who would like to be on, please do just contact us and we'll see what we can do. We'll see what we can do. So let me just check my notes here to see that I've mentioned everything that I wanted to mention tonight. We didn't get onto the UK Rwandan axis. That's a big issue. That's a big issue. That's a very exciting issue, very interesting issue. This new liaison with Rwanda, I think it's got potential. We'll maybe get onto that next week. But it's the birthday of the Queen tomorrow, 96 years old. And so it just remains for me to say, as we end this show tonight, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the Queen. See you next week.